Commander Sorik considered the high pay and noted that, while generous, it wasn't suspiciously so just enough to suggest a serious job rather than an impossible one. He observed the last stages of preparation for their faster-than-light jump, mentally weighing the situation. Chagathian mercenary clans, like his, had long been employed by both state and corporate powers for violent operations across the galaxy. Orders to wipe out entire populations were not uncommon in his line of work, though admittedly more extreme than typical bounties or intimidation contracts. Yet Sorik was no stranger to such tasks. His kind had earned a fearsome reputation as enforcers and exterminators. Even the Galactic Council, which officially condemned piracy and lawless raiding, had quietly employed his kind when plausible deniability was required. Chagathians, often branded criminals one day, could just as easily be hired as elite privateers the next. But this mission bore the unmistakable stench of overkill. Usually, a few survivors were left behind to serve as a living warning to others. The total eradication clause in this contract suggested a deeper motive, possibly indicating that these new targets, the humans, had done something truly disruptive. Whatever diplomatic hornet's nest they had stirred, it was none of his concern. What mattered was the payoff, which was enough to feed his clan and ensure their future survival. The timing of the job was almost too perfect. Recent years had been lean, and the clan's stored resources had dwindled to alarming levels. The Council of Elders had delivered a grim ultimatum: secure work immediately, or face the shame and deadly consequences of failed leadership. Sorik bristled at the memory. He had led them to greatness. His battlefield tactics had allowed their numbers to swell beyond the limits of their current territory. He believed this success should have been a springboard for expansion into new space by challenging rival clans. But the Elders were overly cautious, clinging to the safety of preservation over the risky potential for growth. It was true that the Chagathian Empire had suffered catastrophic defeat 300 years prior, a war that fractured their civilization and brought them to the brink of extinction. Yes, every Chagathian life was precious, but not so precious that thousands couldn't be sacrificed if it meant reclaiming territory and dominance. Fresh conquests, especially of a viable species, could help replenish their numbers and reinvigorate their legacy. With the job offer currently in hand, Sorik was spared from making such an argument before the council. The promise of wealth and a new homeworld had silenced opposition. The client had offered the Elders a moon as part of the deal. While the celestial body was small and located in a remote, inhospitable system, unlikely to support more than 100,000 inhabitants, it represented something far more important: permanent home. A safe haven for Chagathians to build, breed, and plan for the future. For a species with no remaining homeworld, this was priceless. It also offered a powerful symbol for the weaker elements of his race, proof that a future could be carved through means other than the warrior's path. Science, engineering, and diplomacy would now have a place among his people, all under the stewardship of Sorik's own clan. Only 2 more human colonies needed to be destroyed for the contract to be fulfilled. These last targets would provide the technology and raw materials necessary to begin construction on their promised moon. The risk, complete faith in their shadowy client's promise that cleanup and cover-up would be handled discreetly using government-level resources. Officially, the moon acquisition was part of a Shezarin economic development program. In reality, the payments had been fronted by the client and documentation fabricated to show anonymous backing from smaller Chagathian clans. The first decades worth of payments had already been arranged, and Sorik had made backup plans should the remaining funds not materialize. He could fake legitimacy well enough if it came to that. Still, the arrangement required secrecy. If humans uncovered who had attacked their colonies and found out about the moon, Sorik's clan would be hunted to extinction. The client had assured him of connections within the upper echelons of the Galactic Council, but even powerful friends couldn't stop what would follow if their role was discovered. Sorik had insisted that all evidence left behind be destroyed, leaving human investigators with so many missing pieces they couldn't reconstruct the truth. No sensor logs, no technology fragments, just void and ashes. Commander Sorik, the fleet stands at full readiness. FTL inhibitors are confirmed active and fully charged, announced first Claude Danik, snapping a crisp salute. Sorik gave a slight flick of his snout in return, acknowledging the report. "A shame those inhibitors are only on loan," he muttered. They weren't the only borrowed equipment. Their new armor plating had been scuffed and artificially worn to resemble that of a typical pirate fleet. The client had wanted pristine gear to ensure mission success, but Sorik had known better. Spotless armor would raise questions. Any observer would immediately suspect a well-funded backer. This had been one of several moments during negotiations when the client tipped their hand. Their resources clearly exceeded those of a rogue actor. Another tell had been the suits provided for his warriors. The armor was state-of-the-art and freshly minted, clearly the product of a well-equipped government-backed facility. It should have been a boon. But Sorik's engineers found an irritating flaw. The rapid charge system used to power the suits was incompatible with civilian infrastructure. All suit systems were dependent on these specialized ports, likely an intentional design choice to make his clan reliant on the client for upkeep. Even the Galactic Council military didn't implement such limitations, knowing well the value of adaptability in hostile environments. This was a leash disguised as a gift future. Support guaranteed only if they continued to serve. Without continued supply, their advanced gear would become useless weight within years. Sorik pushed the thought aside. The engagement was moments away, and he needed his focus sharp. These humans might be weak, but underestimating them was dangerous. A proper naval engagement with a Terran cruiser might have kept his troops focused, but their intelligence had identified the least defended windows for attack. The client wanted this operation clean, fast, and without complications. He gave final orders for the attack. Inform the serrated claw they will remain behind to guard the elders and supply ships. Danik acknowledged with the traditional phrase, "by your voice," before sending the encrypted orders. Subformation 3 will provide our initial defensive screen, Sorik continued. Subformation 1 will flank and protect our inhibitor vessels once we drop in. If the system is uncontested, they will land first. If not, Subformation 3 will drop shock the Once the instructions were acknowledged across the fleet, the countdown began. FTL jump in, 4, 3, 2, 1. The stars distorted and vanished, and when normal space returned, his fleet had exited hyperspace exactly as planned. Sorik had chosen to remain aboard one of the rearguard ships, positioned to reinforce any part of the formation if necessary. More critically, these vessels served as interceptors should any human ship attempt escape beyond the inhibitors range. These were the hunters. Status, Sorik barked as systems adjusted to the new location. All ships report readiness. Inhibitors are online. Communications have been locked to internal modulation, Danik confirmed. Secondary inhibitor is pulsing on a randomized pattern to prevent any decoding. We control the system. Good. Maintain weapons at a quarter charge, enough to respond, but not enough to risk overheating. Full battle readiness in 5 time. Units, begin strategic updates at 15 time units. Out, Sorik ordered calmly. Danik chuckled. Commander, it looks like the humans might give us a little sport. 5 patrol craft and 7 mining rigs are launching, formed into a widescreen, no less. Sorik muttered with amusement, watching the ship trajectories. However, something caught his eye. Over 100 engine trails emerged from the nearby asteroid belt, heading toward the planet. That's an unusual number of mining vessels. Danik ran a quick analysis. Engines and heat signatures matched known industrial platforms. Lasers might sting a little in that many, but they're unarmored, glorified target dummies. Sorik nodded, appreciating the tactical overview but not dismissing the sheer volume of incoming vessels. He studied the developing situation with a predator's focus. Then everything changed. The asteroid belt, what Sorik had initially dismissed as a mere mining zone, erupted with light. The thermal signatures of the supposed mining rigs surged as if triggered by a master switch. Hull plates sloughed off like discarded skin, revealing angular, matte black armor beneath. Shield systems flared to life, cloaking the ships in defensive bubbles that shimmered with plasma charge. Sorik's second heart skipped a beat. These were no mining rigs. They were warships, camouflaged to resemble civilian craft, complete with modified exhaust ports to mask power, output, and mislead scans. Reclassify all incoming vessels. That's not civilian gear. They've been hiding a fleet in the belt, Sorik growled, voice heavy with disbelief and rising fury. Trigger. Full battle readiness. Priority strike on any ship with long range comes. We must prevent an alert. But it was too late. Before the order could propagate through the fleet, the enemy launched hundreds of microfighters, smaller than standard interceptors, but faster and armed with swarming. Munitions erupted from hidden launch bays. Their formation was chaos on radar, but orchestrated with deadly intent. Within seconds, they were diving directly towards Sorik's inhibitor ships, their key to preventing reinforcements from arriving. One of the inhibitors exploded in a brilliant sphere of cascading energy. The screen flared white, then fell dark. Sorik felt the loss deep in his gut. Without the inhibitors, there was no containment. The humans could call for help. Redirect subformation, 3 immediate intercept. Protect the remaining inhibitor. Snapped, even as the second inhibitor flared under concentrated assault. Around them, space turned into a kaleidoscope of light and death. Subformation, 1 reports enemy boarding parties inbound. Danik said, now visibly rattled, his voice edged with disbelief. They've slipped inside our formation. Somehow, ... They knew our positions. That was impossible. Their jump coordinates had been encrypted using Chagathian black level ciphers codes that not even the Galactic Council had broken. For the humans to respond with this level of precision, they'd have needed real-time intel before the jump was made. There was only one explanation: a leak. Get me eyes on all command channels. Monitor for trace echoes. If anyone broadcast even a whisper before the jump, already on it. Commander Danik interjected, working furiously. But we may have a bigger problem. A massive object emerged from behind the asteroid belt, silhouetted against the distance on a battleship Terran in design, but one Sorik had never seen before. It was 5 times the size of a standard cruiser, its hull composed of deep obsidian alloy with streaks of cerulean power veins running across it like glowing scars. Its prow was angled forward like a blade, and along its sides were docking arms, dozens of them releasing wave after wave of additional drone fighters. "That's not a patrol ship," Danik muttered, awe and horror blending in his voice. "That's a goddamn command class prototype." Sorik's jaws tightened. This wasn't a cleanup op. This wasn't even a skirmish. It was a trap. They had walked willingly into a staged execution. "How in the hell did they know?" Sorik muttered, then spoke louder. "Pull all rearguard ships into defensive orbit. Prioritize suppression fire. We're not here to die, we adapt or we vanish." Danik nodded but paused. "Commander, what about the elders? If this turns, we won't be able to extract them in time." Sorik didn't hesitate. "Secure them. On the supply freighters. If this goes worse than expected, initiate protocol Ashfall. No survivors, no evidence." A grim silence settled on the bridge. Ashfall meant destroying not only the enemy, but their own ships, logs, DNA, everything. A scorched earth fallback designed to ensure the clan's anonymity, even in failure. Then came the final blow. One of their encrypted long-range transmission relays began broadcasting, not on their frequency, but on a wide-spectrum civilian band. It was a human voice. "This is Admiral Isara Valen of the Terran Strategic Defense Force, to the Chagathian fleet. You are surrounded. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. This is not a negotiation." The voice was clear, calm, confident, and, more chillingly, familiar. Sorik narrowed his eyes. "Valen," he whispered. He remembered that name. From a colony they had raised 5 years ago, a child's name, recorded in the settlement's registry. The only survivor. She had grown up, and she had been waiting for him. A cold, gnawing silence descended on the bridge. Every crew member stared at the communication feed, stunned. Sorik's mandibles clenched tight. The name echoed through him. Like a forgotten curse, Valen. He had reviewed thousands of files, processed countless casualties over the decades, but this one he remembered not for the damage caused, but for what they had missed. A single life. A crack in their otherwise flawless extermination record. And now that crack had become a blade at his throat. She was never supposed to survive. Sorik muttered, barely audible, but Danik heard. His fingers hovered over the control surface. Trembling, "We underestimated them," he said, eyes flickering with the glow of the emergency readouts. "They've built this entire operation around vengeance." Sorik straightened. His posture shifted from strategist to warlord. "Then vengeance is a language we both speak fluently." The lights on the command deck dimmed as enemy jammers swept through the Chagathian frequencies. Communications began to fragment. Orders were delayed. Visual feeds stuttered into static. But Sorik had prepared for blind combat. Switched to analog fallback relays. Line of sight commands only. Decentralized chain of command. Let the war leaders run wild. He turned to Danik, his eyes burning. Broadcast. On the same civilian frequency. "But, Commander, do it." Danik nodded reluctantly and opened the channel. A split second later, Sorik's voice boomed across all bands. "This is Commander Sorik of Clan Kereth. To Admiral Valinor, death has waited long enough." The line went dead. No reply came. None was needed. The next wave hit harder. Human. Dronecraft weren't just swarming now. They were coordinating in unpredictable bursts, sacrificing units to draw Chagathian fire before unleashing payloads at their flanks. It wasn't brute force. It was chess with lives. From the front lines came disturbing updates. Our stealth cruiser Varuk just vanished. What do you mean vanished? There was no explosion, no debris. One moment it was pinging back, and then it wasn't. Danik brought up a trace overlay. In the moment before disappearance, there had been a faint pulse non-thermal, non-gravitational, dimensional phasing. Sorik asked. Danik nodded slowly. Experimental tech. We've heard rumors that humans were testing slip weapons. Weapons that dislocate matter across dimensional threads. You're telling me they're erasing our ships? More like hiding them in folds of unreality. Permanently. The implications were staggering. Sorik's fleet, composed of warriors who once humbled Council star systems, was being dismantled by a species that was never supposed to survive the First Contact War. And now they had not only survived, but evolved. He stepped away from the command dais and stared at the projected battle map. Red dots, his ships were bleeding from the center outward. Blue enemy markers surged forward like a tidal wave. The inhibitors were gone. Reinforcements would come, and not just from Earth. Mars, Europa, the Outer Rim colonies. The humans had built an empire from Ashazand. This battle was not a last stand, it was an opening move. Sorik turned slowly, scanning every face on the bridge. This isn't a loss, he said firmly. This is data. Let them taste blood. Let them believe they've won. Because now we know the truth, what they've become. And next time, he paused, letting the fury build. We come as ghosts. Danik hesitated. You're calling. The retreat, Sorik nodded, signaled the remaining fleets, split into phantom cells. Scatter and regroup at the void line. We abandon the bodies, but the memory survives. And Valen, Sorik stared into the stars. Her war is personal. Now so is mine. He turned his back to the screen as another Chagathian vessel was ripped from space by the Terran flagships. Dimensional weapon dot behind him. The void burned, but ahead. Revenge. In the weeks that followed the retreat, the Chagathian presence in the sector seemed to dissolve like mist in sunlight. Entire squadrons disappeared into the deep folds of space, hiding in the uncharted voids beyond Council-mapped territory. Not a trace was left. Behind no comes chatter, no hyperspace trails. To the Galactic Council, it was a mystery. To Admiral Valen, it was a warning. She stood atop the observation deck of the Resolute Dawn, watching the wreckage field orbiting the shattered moon where the last major skirmish had taken place. Thousands of twisted hulls floated in silent rotation, some Chagathian, many their own. Even in victory, the cost had been unbearable. A junior officer approached. Ma'am, scans, confirm it. Sorik's flagship escaped. It folded into slipspace. Destination unknown. Valen didn't respond immediately. Her fingers traced the edge of a cracked insignia recovered from the battlefield Chagathian war medal. Scorched and bloodstained. She closed her hand around it. Of course he did. She whispered. Behind her, the bridge buzzed with quiet coordination. Techs ran simulations. Engineers recalibrated phasic cannons. Medics inventoried trauma bays filled with cryo-sealed wounded. The humans had won a major battle, but the war had only begun. Open a council channel, she ordered. The officer blinked. You want to speak to the council directly? Yes, full quorum. The officer hesitated, but complied. Moments later, Valen stood before a high-resolution holoray that beamed in the representatives of the Galactic Council. avatars from dozens of species. Some still wore ceremonial robes. Others were military leaders, wrapped in sashes of rank and blood. The Chagathian's absence was conspicuous. A Tirani Prime Delegate sneered Admiral Valen. "We see you've emerged victorious, despite your species' primitive aggression." Valen didn't blink. The aggression was never ours, only the resistance. A Zindari matriarch narrowed her eyes. We had ordered no open conflict. The extermination clause was to remain sealed until re-evaluation. Valen tilted her head. Then why was Sorik sent to wipe us out without warning? No one answered. She took a step forward, letting the raw footage from the battle stream behind her explosions. Chagathian war beasts, the dimensional erasure of ships. She let it play in silence. Then she looked each representative in the eye. "We were a forgotten file in your archives. A mistake, you thought. A smudge on a perfect war record." The council murmured. "But now," she continued, "you've given us clarity. We know what you are. We know what you fear. And more importantly, we know how to beat you." Silence. "I'm not here to ask for inclusion in your council," she said. "I'm here to tell you, Earth is no longer your concern. We will not bow, we will not fade, and we will never forget." The Tirani delegate hissed, "Are you declaring war on the Galactic Council?" Valen smiled coldly. "I'm not declaring war, I'm declaring truth." She cut the channel far beyond the Council's reach. In a hidden asteroid cloister wrapped in radiation cloaks and gravitational echoes, Sorik stood in a dark chamber surrounded by the remaining clan leaders, warriors, tacticians, priests of war. All had tasted defeat, all hungered for reversal. He raised a small, crude earth relic, a soldier's helmet, cracked and burned, dug from the ruins of the first invasion a century ago. "This was supposed to be extinction," he growled. "Instead, we gave them identity, gave them fire. They are no longer prey," one warlord said. Sorik turned toward him. "No, they are our mirror." The chamber pulsed with silent tension, and like any reflection, Sorik said, eyes burning with vengeance, "They must be shattered." From the dying light of that hidden chamber, Sorik emerged with a new purpose. Not just a soldier, not just a clan leader, but something far more dangerous, survivor, humiliated, enraged, and sharpened into a spear. The Chagothians had always fought for conquest, for honor, for resource dominance. But now, Sorik had seen a glimpse of what the humans had become. What they had built from ruin, and more terrifyingly, what they had lost to become this dangerous. He walked silently down the narrow corridors of the Void Temple, past the living walls etched with ancestral battles. Children of his kind, too young to remember the first contact, worn out in meditation before ancient weapons, their minds being programmed with the old glories. But Sorik no longer believed in glories, not the old kind. Those days had passed. He entered the Sanctum Vault, a vast chamber filled with artifacts, stasis containers, and forbidden technologies the Galactic Council had long banned. In the center stood something monstrous, towering biomechanical husk, dormant but pulsing faintly with internal light. Its limbs were spiked with interdimensional wiring. Its torso carried the scars of a dozen failed experiments. Danik stood beside it, nervously adjusting a power coupler. "You really want to use this?" Danik asked. The council forbade it for a reason. It nearly unraveled the gravitational lattice of a moon. They forbade it because it worked, Sorik growled. They feared what we could become without their leash. Danik hesitated. And the humans, they already crossed that line. He motioned toward the husk. This was meant to breach realities, to twist time, skip battles, erase threats, before they were born. It failed because we used it too soon. He turned slowly, facing his oldest advisor. Now we finish what they began. Meanwhile, deep in the Sol system, Valen stood before a council of Earth's own military, scientific, strategic, and civil. The United Front, as it was now called, composed of former rival nations who had been forged into steel by war and necessity. The hologram of Sorik's last transmission hovered in the room, looping his final words. "We come as ghosts." Valen spoke with precision. "He won't strike like before. Not with armies, not immediately. He'll send whispers first, disappearances, collapsing physics, ghost fleets from nowhere. If we wait for another frontal assault, we're already dead." A Tech General raised an eyebrow. "Then what's your recommendation?" She turned toward a display of rotating star systems, marked with recent disturbances, ships lost without debris, black holes forming too early, and signs of reality-fold interference. "We take the war to them." A murmur spread across the chamber. Valen stepped forward, tapping the system far beyond council, reach outside even the old exclusion zone. Our scouts picked up faint pulses, resonances, matching Sorik's last known energy output. "They're testing again." A grizzled admiral crossed his arms. "You're suggesting we send a fleet into unmapped space with no supply lines?" "No," Valen said. "I'm suggesting we send ghosts of our own." From behind, the chamber doors hissed open. A row of soldiers stepped in, unmarked, silent, clad in armor unfamiliar to the generals. They volunteered for a program we swore we'd never use. Soldiers with no history, no family, no future, only purpose. She looked each member of the council in the eye. "They're not scouts. They're a message. One Sorik will understand. At the edges of the galaxy, in a war that the council refused to acknowledge, two enemies, once predator and prey, hunted each other in the dark. One fueled by rage and pride, the other by vengeance and memory. And between them, the galaxy held its breath, because when ghosts go to war, the living rarely survive. The black of space had never felt so tight. The human vessel, codename Spectre, one moved through a region of uncharted subspace, like a whisper caught in a dying breath. No beacons, no stars, only the flickering distortion of reality itself, the bleed, where time warped and the rules of physics occasionally forgot to apply. Inside, the elite crew sat in near silence. No one wore national insignia. No one had last names. They had been erased from Earth's records the moment they boarded. What they carried was more than weapons. It was knowledge, ancient, alien, and classified to the point that even speaking it aloud felt like blasphemy. Captain Mira Thorne, Valon's hand-picked strike commander, watched the readings on her neural display. "There," she said, "a pulse, 3.70 off starboard. Dimensional shear and ... echoing." The pilot shivered. "Something's calling." "Not calling," she corrected. "Scanning." On the other side of that distortion, Sorik stood before the reactivated war husk, the Echodyne core, built from stolen council tech and powered by a core of fragmented star matter. It pulsed with potential energy, fracturing nearby gravity wells in unpredictable spasms. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a seed of erasure. When planted, it would rewrite a target's history across quantum timelines, A planet could simply vanish from ever having existed beside him. Danik stared at the data flowing across the art glass. Human incursion detected, he said. Deep in the bleed. Small vessel, camouflaged well, but not well enough. Sorik's face didn't flinch. Send the shadows. No full strike. Let's see what ghosts they've sent. Moments later, the Spectre 1 jolted violently. Contact, shouted the weapons officer. Not ships, not signatures, just ... shapes. From the void emerged half-formed entities, twisted constructs of memory and machine, moving like puppets whose strings were yanked by forgotten gods. They bore Chagathian armor, but flickered between Irisum from the ancient wars, others from futures that hadn't yet happened. Captain Thorne grit her teeth. Deploy counter-reco field. Prep the Shard team. We're going in. The drop pod tore through the bleed like a comet, trailing stabilizing runes and null gravity dampeners. Inside, 5 human operatives floated in 0G, encased in armor that shimmered with flickers of their own possible deaths. The suits were calibrated to shift probabilities in real time, making it impossible to hit them with anything less than absolute fate. As they descended, the Echodyne core came into view. A living cathedral of entropy. Dozens of Chagathian priests knelt before it, feeding it rituals spoken in languages not meant for sound. Above them all Sorik, glowing with residual energy from the machine, eyes like twin novas, the Shard team. Landed hard. Their blades didn't glow. Their bullets didn't spark. Every strike they made was precise, silent, intentional, meant not to kill flesh, but to remove presence. They weren't here to win. They were here to make it never happen. But Sorik had anticipated this. He stepped forward into their time-bent battlefield, raising a single claw. The core responded, flaring out in a sphere of anti-memory, locking down causality in 1,000 fragmented loops. One of the Shard soldiers, Cipher 3, blinked and suddenly aged into dust. Another reversed into infancy and vanished. The rest held formation. Captain Thorne moved forward, carrying a spike of encoded antimatter weapon not meant to explode, but to anchor truth. She drove it into the core's base. Reality screamed. Across galaxies, stars dimmed momentarily. Council archives experienced mass data loss. Histories rewrote themselves mid-scroll, and in the heart of the bleed, time stood still. Sorik lunged. Thorne met him. They didn't speak. There was no need. Their battle played out not in movement, but in memory. Every time Sorik struck, he tried to erase her reason for fighting. Every time she countered, she nailed his existence to a fixed point he couldn't rewrite. Until, with one final surge, she pushed the spike deeper. The core shattered inward, imploding, collapsing not into destruction, but undoing. Sorik's scream was the last thing that ever echoed in that region of space. Back on Earth, Admiral Valen received a single transmission. Mission complete. Spectre 1 lost. Bleed sealed. Target neutralized. She stood silent for a long time, then she whispered, "You'll be remembered. Even if history forgets you."